The weak exist to be broken. That is what every wolf in the Ironwood pack told Kira since the day she first shifted. But on the night of the winter gathering, when she spoke 5 words that should have been impossible, she would learn that some things break backwards, and the shards cut deepest when they fly in the wrong direction. The great hall blazed with firelight and the heat of 200 bodies pressed together against the January cold. Kira stood at the very back, spine against the stone wall, making herself as small as possible. That was the first lesson Omegas learned. Be small. Be silent. Be grateful they let you breathe their air. The winter gathering was mandatory. Every wolf in Ironwood territory had to attend, even her. Especially her. Alpha Blackthorn liked his displays of hierarchy, and what better display than having the lowest wolf in the pack stand witness to the strength of her betters. Kira's wolf whimpered inside her chest, a small frightened thing that had never quite figured out how to be a predator. Other wolves described their inner beasts as powerful, wild, barely contained. Hers felt like a beaten dog that flinched at shadows. She wore her plainest dress, gray and shapeless, because anything else invited attention. Her dark hair hung loose around her face, unwashed because Omegas were last in line for the hot water, and by the time her turn came the pipes ran cold. Her hands were rough from work, nails broken from scrubbing floors and hauling firewood, and doing all the tasks that wolves with status refused to touch. 22 years old, and she had never been touched gently. Never been looked at with anything but disdain or disgust. Never been spoken to except in commands. Fetch this. Clean that. Move faster. Why are you so useless? The questions were rhetorical. Everyone knew why. She was Omega. She was born wrong. Born weak. Born to serve. Around her, the pack celebrated. Alphas and betas gathered in tight clusters, drinking spiced wine and telling hunting stories. Their mates hung on their arms, beautiful and confident in silk dresses and polished jewelry. Children raced between the tables, their laughter bright and careless. No one looked at Kira. That was normal. She had perfected the art of being invisible. Alpha Blackthorn stood at the head table, a massive man with silver threading his black hair and scars marking his face like badges of honor. He ruled Ironwood with an iron fist and an iron will, and no one questioned him. Not twice, anyway. Beside him sat his son, Darius. Kira's eyes found him without permission, the way they always did. She hated herself for it, but her gaze was drawn to him like iron to a magnet, helpless and inevitable. He was everything an alpha heir should be. Tall, broad-shouldered, with his father's black hair and a face that could have been carved from stone. Sharp jaw, straight nose, eyes the color of amber that seemed to catch and hold firelight. 25 years old and already carrying the weight of command in every movement, every gesture. He stood when he spoke, and the room fell silent. He smiled, and wolves leaned closer. He was gravity, and everyone else was just orbiting. Kira had learned long ago not to orbit too close. Darius Blackthorn had made his opinion of her very clear the first time they met. She had been 15, newly shifted, still learning to navigate the pack hierarchy. She had accidentally brushed against him in a hallway, and he had shoved her into the wall so hard her shoulder dislocated. Watch where you are going, Omega. Your stink offends me. She had not spoken to him since. Had not looked at him directly. Had made sure to be nowhere he might be, because alphas like Darius did not forgive proximity from creatures like her. But tonight, she looked. Just for a moment. Just to torture herself with the distance between what she was and what she could never be. And that was when it happened. The bond snapped into place like a rubber band pulled too tight and released. One moment, Kira was standing against the wall, invisible and insignificant. The next, every nerve in her body ignited. Heat flooded her veins, not the heat of fire, but the heat of recognition, of something ancient and absolute clicking into place. Mate. Her wolf surged forward, no longer whimpering, no longer small. For the first time in Kira's life, her beast roared inside her chest with absolute certainty. Mine. Ours. Mate. The word echoed in her skull like a bell, deafening and undeniable. She could feel him. Not just see him, but feel him, as if a golden thread had spun itself between her heart and his, connecting them in a way that transcended pack bonds or blood ties. This was older. Primal. Moon-blessed. Fated mates. the rarest gift the goddess could bestow. One wolf in 1,000 found their true mate, the one soul perfectly matched to theirs. It was supposed to be sacred. Beautiful. The foundation of the strongest pack bonds. Kira's hands began to shake. No. Please no. But her wolf did not care about please or no. Her wolf was screaming mine at the alpha air across the crowded hall, demanding she go to him, claim him, make him see. And then Darius Blackthorn went very, very still. His head snapped toward her, amber eyes locking onto hers across 60 feet of space and 200 wolves. His nostrils flared. His entire body went rigid. He felt it too. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, the world held its breath. Kira saw the recognition flash across his face. Saw his wolf rise to the surface, turning his eyes molten gold. Saw him take one involuntary step toward her. Then his expression twisted. Not into joy. Not into wonder. Into revulsion. Darius's lip curled back from his teeth. His hands clenched into fists. And Kira watched frozen as the most powerful wolf in the pack looked at her like she was rotting meat. The conversation around them had started to dim. Wolves noticed when an alpha went still. They noticed when tension crackled through the air like lightning before a storm. Alpha Blackthorn turned to his son, frowning. Darius, what is it? Darius did not answer his father. He was still staring at Kira, and now others were following his gaze. Heads turned. Whispers started. Why is he looking at the Omega? What is happening? Is something wrong with her? Kira wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to bolt, to escape, to get away before whatever was about to happen destroyed her completely. But her wolf would not let her move. Her wolf was still straining toward him, still screaming mate, still refusing to accept what Kira's human mind already knew. He was going to reject her. Darius took a breath. Then another. His jaw worked like he was chewing glass. The entire hall had gone silent now, 200 wolves watching the alpha air with predatory focus. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the room. I, Alpha Darius Blackthorn, reject you, Kira of no bloodline, as my mate. The words hit like a physical blow. Kira felt her knees buckle, felt the golden thread between them turn to barbed wire, tearing at her insides. The mate bond did not break gently. It shredded, ripping through her chest and leaving raw wounds that bled in visible agony. She gasped, pressing a hand to her sternum as if she could hold herself together through sheer force of will. Around her, the pack reacted. Some laughed. Hi, bright sounds of genuine amusement. Of course the Omega got mate bonded to an alpha. Of course the goddess played such a cruel joke. Of course Darius rejected her. Others looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight and avoiding eye contact. Rejections happened, but they were usually private. This was a public execution. Beta Thomas, the same wolf who had told her not to come to the pack shelter during the blizzard last month, grinned wide. Goddess, have mercy. Even fate has a sense of humor. His mate Catherine actually giggled. Poor Darius. Imagine being saddled with that. Kira's vision blurred. She could not breathe properly. Her wolf was howling, a sound of such profound loss that it threatened to tear her apart from the inside out. This was it. The final proof that she was worthless. Even the moon goddess's gift was wasted on her. She should accept it. Bow her head. Speak the words that would complete the rejection and sever the bond entirely. I accept your rejection. That was what she was supposed to say. That was what every rejected wolf said, because fighting a rejection only prolonged the agony. The bond could not exist if one side refused it. Kira opened her mouth. The words were right there, ready to fall from her lips like stones into dark water. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the laughter. Maybe it was the way Darius stood there, tall and strong and untouched, while she bled. Maybe it was 22 years of swallowing every hurt, every insult, every casual cruelty. Maybe her wolf, for the first time in her life, was done being silent. Kira straightened. It took everything she had. Her legs shook. Her hands trembled. But she pulled herself upright and lifted her chin. The hall went quieter. This was wrong. Omegas did not stand tall. They cowered. Darius's eyes narrowed. Say it. Accept the rejection. It was a command, weighted with alpha authority. It should have driven her to her knees. But the bond was still there, tattered and bleeding but present. And through that bond, Kira could feel something she was not supposed to feel. His wolf was screaming too. Not with loss. With rage. Rage at her. But underneath that, buried so deep he probably did not even recognize it, was fear. He was afraid of her. The realization was absurd. Impossible. She was nothing. He was everything. What could he possibly fear? But she felt it, thrumming through the mangled connection between them. Terror, sharp and acidic. And something in Kira's chest, something that had been cracked and beaten for so long she forgot it existed, suddenly hardened. She looked Darius Blackthorn in his amber eyes and felt her wolf rise. Not the whimpering, frightened creature that flinched at shadows. Something else. Something that had been buried so deep even she did not know it was there. When she spoke, her voice did not shake. I, Kira, accept your rejection. The pack relaxed. Good. The Omega knew her place. Darius's shoulders dropped. His father nodded, satisfied. Beta Thomas smirked. Then Kira spoke again. And I reject you in return, Darius Blackthorn. Silence. Not the quiet of anticipation. The silence of absolute shock. Wolves did not reject their rejectors. It was not done. It served no purpose. The bond was already broken from one side. Speaking a counter-rejection was pointless. Except for the old laws. The ancient laws that no one remembered because they had not been invoked in centuries. The laws that said when a rejected wolf spoke a rejection in return, with intention and authority, the bond did not simply break. It exploded. Kira felt it detonate inside her chest. The golden thread between them did not sever. It ignited, burning white-hot, and the force of it blasted outward. Darius staggered. His hand flew to his chest. Blood began to drip from his nose, bright red against his skin. Around them, wolves stumbled backward. The ones closest to Darius fell to their knees, driven down by a pressure they could not name. Alpha Blackthorn roared. What did you do? But Kira could not answer. The explosion was not just hitting Darius. It was tearing through her too, ripping at her from the inside out. She felt her knees hit the stone floor. Felt her vision go white. Somewhere far away, she heard screaming. Maybe it was her. Maybe it was Darius. Maybe it was the bond itself, dying violently instead of fading quietly. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Darius on his knees, amber eyes wide with something that looked almost like terror, staring at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Then nothing. When Kira awoke, she was alone. Not in the great hall. They had moved her somewhere. A small room, stone walls, a single narrow window. Cold. Dark. She tried to sit up and her entire body screamed in protest. Everything hurt. Her chest felt like it had been hollowed out with a dull knife. The bond was gone. Completely. Not even an echo remained. The door opened. Beta Thomas stood in the doorway, his expression carved from ice. You are exiled, he said flatly. Alpha's orders. You attacked the air. I did not attack anyone. You spoke words that harmed him. That is attack enough. He wiped blood from his face because of you, Omega. Kira tried to stand. Her legs would not hold her. She collapsed back onto the cold floor. Thomas did not help her up. Collect yourself. You have 1 hour to leave Pack Lands. If you are found within our borders after dawn, you will be killed for assaulting an Alpha. He turned to leave. Where am I supposed to go? Thomas glanced back, and his smile was cruel. Not our concern. You rejected the Alpha heir. You broke Pack law. Be grateful we are letting you live. The door slammed shut. Kira lay on the stone floor and did not cry. She was too empty for tears. Too hollow. She had spoken 5 words, and they had destroyed her life. But as she finally dragged herself upright, as she gathered the few possessions they allowed her and prepared to walk into the winter night with nowhere to go, she felt something strange. Her wolf was quiet. Not whimpering. Not afraid. Calm. For the first time in 22 years, her wolf was calm. Kira pulled her thin coat tight around her shoulders, stepped out into the snow, and did not look back at the territory that had never been home. Behind her, in the great hall, Darius Blackthorn sat alone in the dark and tried to understand why his hands would not stop shaking. The cabin at the edge of Ironwood territory had been abandoned for 15 years. Kira found it on her 3rd day of walking through snow that reached her knees, when hypothermia was starting to make her thoughts slow and thick. The door hung crooked on rusted hinges. The windows were mostly intact, though cracks spider-webbed across the glass. Inside, dust covered everything in a gray shroud, and the air smelled of rot and mouse droppings and old wood turning soft with decay. It was the most beautiful thing Kira had ever seen. She collapsed inside and did not move for 2 days. When she finally woke, truly woke, the sun was streaming through the broken windows and her body felt different. Not better. Different. Like something inside her had shifted, rearranged itself while she slept. Her wolf stirred. Still calm. Still quiet. But present in a way it had never been before. Kira sat up slowly, taking inventory. Her exile clothes were filthy, crusted with snow and mud. Her hair was matted. She was starving, hollow with hunger that gnawed at her stomach. But she was alive. The first week was survival. She found a stream half frozen over and broke through the ice to drink. She set snares using wire she found in the cabin, catching 2 rabbits that she cooked over a fire built from splintered furniture. She stuffed rags into the window cracks to keep out the wind. It was harder than anything she had done before. It was also the first time in her life that the work was for herself, not for wolves who despised her. The second week, something strange began to happen. Kira woke one morning and realized she could hear the mice in the walls. Not just the scratching sounds any wolf could detect, but individual heartbeats. She could smell their fear, sharp and sour. When she focused, she could sense exactly where they were, as if they were glowing points of heat in the darkness. Her senses had always been weak. Omega dull, the pack called it. But now they were sharpening, honing themselves like blades on a whetstone. By the third week, she could hear wolves moving through the forest 2 miles away. Could smell deer on the wind from even farther. When she caught her reflection in a shard of broken mirror, her eyes seemed brighter, more focused. Her wolf was growing. Kira did not understand it. Rejected wolves were supposed to weaken, not strengthen. The severing of a mate bond was a wound that took months to heal, leaving scars that never fully faded. But she did not feel wounded. She felt awake. Meanwhile, 60 miles away in the heart of Ironwood territory, Darius Blackthorn was dying. Not literally. Not yet. But something was very, very wrong. It started the morning after the rejection. He woke to find his hands shaking so badly he could not button his shirt. His father found him that way, standing half-dressed in his room, staring at his trembling fingers like they belonged to someone else. "What is wrong with you?" Alpha Blackthorn demanded. Darius did not know how to answer. He felt hollowed out, as if someone had reached inside his chest and scooped out something vital. His wolf, usually a constant presence just beneath his skin, felt distant. Muted. "Nothing," he lied. "Just tired." But it got worse. By the second week, Darius could not shift. He tried, forcing the change, and his body refused to cooperate. His bones ached with the effort, but would not break and reform. His wolf snarled inside him, furious and trapped. By the third week, his commands stopped working. And Alpha's authority was absolute. When Darius gave an order, weighted with his will, other wolves obeyed. It was not choice. It was compulsion, written into the hierarchy of their kind. But when he told Beta Thomas to organize the hunting parties, Thomas hesitated. Just for a second. Just long enough for doubt to flicker across his face before obedience kicked in. Darius felt it like a slap. His power was slipping. His father noticed. Of course his father noticed. Alpha Blackthorn was not blind, and weakness in the air was weakness in the pack. They met in the Alpha's private study, a room lined with books and weapons and the mounted heads of wolves who had challenged Blackthorn rule and lost. "You cannot shift," his father said flatly. It was not a question. Darius stood rigid, hands clasped behind his back to hide their shaking. "It is temporary." "Is it?" "Because from where I stand, you look like a wolf losing his grip. I rejected a bond. That is all. The effects will fade." Alpha Blackthorn leaned back in his chair, studying his son with eyes that missed nothing. "You rejected an Omega. That should have been meaningless. Instead, you bled. You staggered. Half the pack saw you brought to your knees by a creature that should not have been able to touch you." She spoke words. Nothing more. Words have power, boy. Especially old words. His father's gaze sharpened. What exactly did she say? Darius's jaw tightened. She accepted the rejection. Then she rejected me in return. The silence that followed was suffocating. Alpha Blackthorn stood slowly, every movement deliberate. She counter-rejected you? Yes. With intention? Darius thought of the way Kira had straightened. The way her voice had not shaken. The way her eyes had met his with something that looked almost like defiance. Yes, he admitted. His father crossed to the bookshelf and pulled down a leather-bound volume so old the pages cracked when he opened it. He flipped through, muttering, until he found what he was looking for. Here. He turned the book toward Darius. Read. The text was ancient, written in a dialect Darius barely recognized. But he understood enough. When a wolf rejects their fated mate, and the rejected speaks rejection in return with true will and ancient right, the bond does not sever. It reverses. The strength that would have flowed between them as mates instead flows backward, from the one who rejected first to the one who rejected second. The rejecter becomes the rejected. Power shifts. Darius felt his blood go cold. That is not possible. It is old law. Older than pack structure. Older than Alpha and Omega. His father's expression was grim. You did not just reject your mate, Darius. You rejected your own strength. She is an Omega. She has no strength to take. Are you certain? Because from what I am seeing, you are weakening. And if she is gaining what you are losing, then she was never as weak as you believed. Darius wanted to argue. Wanted to insist this was insane, impossible. But his hands were still shaking, and his wolf was still muted, and deep in his chest where the mate bond had been, there was only emptiness. How do I fix it? He asked, and hated how his voice sounded. Small. Desperate. Alpha Blackthorn closed the book. There is only one way to reverse a reversal. She has to accept you as her mate. Willingly. Without coercion. She is exiled. Then you had better hope she survived the exile. Because if she died out there, you will continue weakening until there is nothing left of the Alpha you were supposed to be. Darius left his father's study and went to his room. He sat on the edge of his bed and stared at the wall and tried to process what he had just learned. Kira was not weakening. She was strengthening. Every ounce of dominance he lost, she gained. The Omega he had rejected with such disgust was becoming what he was supposed to be. And he needed her to save him. The thought made him want to vomit. He had never needed anyone. Need was weakness. Need was submission. He was an Alpha, born to command, bred to rule. The idea that his survival depended on the mercy of a wolf he had publicly humiliated was unbearable. But his father was right. He could feel it now, the slow drain of his power. Like blood leaking from a wound he could not see or stitch closed. If he did nothing, he would become what she had been. Powerless. Weak. Omega. Darius stood. Made his decision. He would go to her. He would make her understand. She was Omega. She would do as she was told, bond or no bond. He would command her to accept him, and this nightmare would end. It took him 3 days to find her. The cabin was worse than he expected. Half collapsed, leaking cold, barely shelter at all. But smoke rose from the chimney, and when he approached the door, he could smell her inside. She smelled different. Stronger. The scent that had once been meek and forgettable now had an edge to it, something sharp that made his wolf stir uneasily. He knocked once, then pushed the door open without waiting for permission. Kira stood in the center of the single room, and Darius stopped. She looked different. Thinner, but not weaker. Her dark hair was clean, pulled back from a face that seemed sharper somehow, more defined. Her eyes met his without flinching. But it was the way she held herself that struck him. Straight. Steady. Like she was not afraid of him at all. Get out, she said. Darius blinked. What? You heard me. Get out of my home. This is pack territory. I go where I please. No. Kira stepped forward, and Darius felt his wolf recoil. This cabin is past the boundary markers. I checked. I am outside Ironwood lands. You have no authority here. She was right. The cabin sat just beyond the edge of their territory, in the unclaimed buffer zone between packs. Technically, she was not trespassing. Technically, he was. We need to talk, he said, forcing steel into his voice. We have nothing to discuss. Yes, we do. The rejection. It is causing problems. For you, Kira said. Not for me. Darius felt anger flare, hot and familiar. You do not understand what you did. I understand perfectly. You rejected me because I am Omega. I rejected you because you are cruel. Now we are both free of a bond neither of us wanted. It is not that simple. Yes, Darius. It is. He took a step toward her, pulling on the alpha authority that had always worked before. Accept me as your mate. The command fell flat. It had no weight, no power. Kira did not even flinch. She smiled, and it was not kind. You cannot command me anymore. Did you notice? Your alpha voice does not work on me. Not since the reversal. Reversal, Darius echoed. So you know. I figured it out. Took me a while. But when I started getting stronger and you started getting weaker, the pattern became obvious. Darius's hands clenched into fists. Fix it. No. You will become nothing without me. Good. Then I will be nothing the same way you made me nothing for 22 years. Kira crossed her arms. How does it feel, Darius? Knowing your strength is draining away? Knowing you need someone you despise just to survive? I never despised you. You called me worthless. You shoved me into walls. You rejected me in front of the entire pack and laughed while I bled. I did what was necessary. Necessary. Kira's laugh was bitter. To protect your pride? Your status? You rejected me because you were afraid of what it would mean to have an Omega as a mate. And now you are reaping exactly what you sowed. Darius felt desperation claw at his throat. If I weaken too much, the pack will be vulnerable. Rival packs will attack. Wolves will die. Then you should have thought of that before you humiliated me. Innocent wolves will suffer because of your pride. My pride? Kira stepped closer, and Darius instinctively stepped back. You stood in front of 200 wolves and destroyed me. You exiled me into winter with nothing. You would have let me die in the snow. And now you come here, to the hovel I barely survived in, and demand I save you? I am asking. No, you're not. You are ordering. You came here expecting me to obey because that is what Omegas do. She shook her head. I am not that wolf anymore, Darius. The bond reversal did not just take your strength. It gave me something I never had before. A spine. The silence stretched between them, sharp as broken glass. Please, Darius said, and the word tasted like poison. The pack needs me. The pack exiled me. Beta Thomas told me I would be killed if I crossed the border. Your father declared me an enemy. Why would I save any of you? Because you are better than that. Am I? How would you know? You never looked at me long enough to find out. Darius had no answer. He stood in her ramshackle cabin, in the home she had clawed back from ruin, and realized with sinking certainty that she was not going to help him. Leave, Kira said quietly. And do not come back. You wanted me gone. I am gone. Live with it. Darius turned and walked out into the cold. Behind him, the door shut with a finality that sounded like a coffin closing. He made it halfway back to Packlands before he had to stop and lean against a tree, his whole body shaking with something that felt dangerously close to panic. She had said no. She had looked him in the eye and refused. And there was nothing he could do about it. 4 days later, the attack came. Darius was in the training yard when he felt the first wolf die. The pack bond flared with agony, then went silent. Then another. And another. Raiders. From the north. Shadow Ridge pack, their oldest rivals, sensing weakness like sharks scenting blood. Alpha Blackthorn was roaring orders, organizing defenses, but Darius could see the truth in his father's eyes. They were not strong enough. Not anymore. Darius tried to shift, tried to force his wolf to the surface so he could fight. His body convulsed, bones grinding, but not breaking. He fell to his knees in the dirt, gasping. Useless. He was useless. Beta Thomas ran past, already shifted, heading toward the sound of battle. Catherine followed, her wolf sleek and fast. More pack bonds winked out. More wolves dying. Darius dragged himself to his feet and stumbled toward the fight. If he could not shift, he would fight as a human. He would die as a human if that was what it took. The battle was chaos. Shadow Ridge wolves tore through their defenses like they were made of paper. Ironwood was losing badly. Darius saw his father fighting 3 wolves at once, blood streaming from a dozen wounds. Saw young wolves, barely shifted for the first time, trying to defend territory they did not yet know how to protect. He grabbed a fallen branch, thick as his arm, and swung it at the nearest enemy wolf. It connected with the skull, hard enough to crack bone. The wolf yelped and turned on him. Darius swung again. And again. Fighting with wood and desperation while his wolf screamed uselessly inside him. He was going to die here. They were all going to die. Then Beta Thomas appeared at his side, human now, bleeding from a gash across his ribs. "We need help," Thomas gasped. "We need reinforcements. We need—" He trailed off, but Darius knew what he was going to say. "We need her." "No," Darius said. "Darius, we are dying. She will not come." "Then we send someone to beg." Thomas grabbed his arm. "Your pride is not worth our lives." Darius looked at the battle. At the wolves falling. At his father stumbling, exhausted. "Go," he said. "Send someone." Thomas nodded and turned to shout orders. But there was no one to send. Everyone who could fight was fighting. Everyone else was too young or too old or too injured. "I will go," Catherine said, limping up to them. Her wolf form was battered, one eye swollen shut. "You are hurt," Thomas protested. "We are all hurt. But I am fast." She looked at Darius, and her expression was strange. Pleading almost. "Please. My children are in the safe house. If we fall, they die." Darius felt something crack inside him. "Go." Catherine shifted despite her injuries and ran. Darius turned back to the battle and kept fighting. Kira was skinning a rabbit when she heard the wolf approaching. Her new senses picked it up from a mile away. One wolf, female, running fast. Injured. Desperate. She set down the knife and waited. Catherine burst from the tree lean and shifted, collapsing in the snow outside Kira's cabin. Blood matted her fur, and when she became human, her skin was pale with blood loss. Kira moved without thinking, dragging the other woman inside and pressing cloth to the worst wounds. "Ironwood," Catherine gasped. "Under attack. Shadow Ridge. We are losing." Kira kept pressure on the gash across Catherine's shoulder. "That is not my concern. Please." Catherine's good eye focused on her, desperate. "I know what we did to you. I know we do not deserve mercy. But there are children. Elders. Wolves who never hurt you. They never helped me either." "I know." Tears streaked down Catherine's face. "I know. But please. Not for us. For them." Kira sat back, hands bloody. "Why should I?" "Because you are better than we are," Catherine whispered. "You always were. We just did not want to see it." Kira looked at this wolf who had laughed when Darius rejected her, who had mocked her, belittled her, made her feel worthless. Catherine was begging now. An alpha's mate, reduced to begging an omega. The reversal was complete. Kira could let them die. She could stay in her cabin and listen to the pack bonds wink out one by one until Ironwood was nothing but a memory. It would be justice. But her wolf stirred, and for the first time, Kira heard its voice clearly. Protect. Not revenge. Not cruelty. Protect. Kira closed her eyes. Took a breath. Made her choice. "Stay here," she told Catherine. "Bind your wounds. Do not follow me." She walked out into the snow and shifted. The transformation was instant, effortless. Her wolf surged forward, and Kira felt power flood her limbs. She was bigger than she had been before. Faster. Stronger. She ran toward Ironwood territory, toward the sound of dying wolves, and did not let herself think about what she was doing. Darius saw her coming. A massive wolf, silver-white in the sunset, moving through the trees like vengeance itself. For a moment, he thought it was an enemy. Then he caught her scent. Kira. But she did not look like the small, frightened Omega he remembered. She looked like an alpha. She looked like a goddess. She hit the battlefield like a meteor. The Shadow Ridge Alpha, a scarred brute named Gareth, turned to face this new threat. He was twice her size, seasoned in 100 fights. Kira tore his throat out in 3 seconds. The other Shadow Ridge wolves froze, shocked. Their alpha was down. Dead. Killed so fast they had not seen her move. Kira shifted to human, standing over Gareth's corpse, naked and covered in blood. "Leave," she said. Her voice carried across the battlefield, weighted with an authority Darius had never heard from her before. "Or follow your alpha." The Shadow Ridge wolves ran. Ironwood stood in shocked silence. Kira turned to face them, and Darius saw every wolf lower their eyes. Submission. Instinctive and absolute. She had just saved them. But more than that, she had just proven what she was. Alpha Blackthorn limped forward, holding his side where ribs had cracked. His eyes were wide with something that looked like recognition. "What are you?" he asked. Kira met his gaze. "What you tried to bury." Blackthorn staggered. "No, it is not possible." An old wolf stepped forward from the crowd. Elder Miriam, ancient and bent, her eyes clouded with age. But her voice was steady. "It is possible," she said. "I know what she is. I was there when her parents died. When the pack elders decided to hide her." "Hide me?" Kira's voice sharpened. "What are you talking about?" Miriam looked at her with something like sorrow. "Your parents were not Omega, child. Your father was Alpha of the Northern Wind Pack. Your mother was his mate, an Alpha in her own right. They were murdered when you were 2 years old. Political enemies. We took you in, but the elders feared you would grow too powerful. Feared you would challenge for leadership." Kira felt the world tilt. "You suppressed me. We gave you wolfsbane in your food every day until you were 15. Just enough to keep your wolf weak. To make you think you were Omega." Miriam's hands shook. "It was wrong. I knew it was wrong. But Alpha Blackthorn ordered it, and I obeyed." All eyes turned to Darius's father. Blackthorn's expression was stone. "I did what I had to do to protect my pack from a potential threat." "You poisoned a child," Kira said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You stole my life. I kept you alive. If the wolves who killed your parents had known you survived, they would have come for you. So you made me a slave instead." The silence was suffocating. Darius felt something inside him break. All these years. All the cruelty. She had been Alpha-born, and they had poisoned her. Broken her. Made her believe she was worthless. And he had rejected her for being exactly what they forced her to become. Kira turned to Elder Miriam. "How long does wolfsbane suppression last?" "Once you stop taking it, the effects fade over weeks." Miriam's gaze was steady. "You were exiled a month ago. You have had no wolfsbane since then. Your true nature is waking. That is why I am getting stronger." "Yes." And the bond reversal accelerated it. Miriam glanced at Darius. "When he rejected you, the old magic recognized what you truly were. It gave you back what was stolen." Kira looked at Darius then, and he had never felt more ashamed in his life. "You rejected me for being weak," she said. "But you made me weak. All of you." Darius had no defense. No excuse. She was right. Alpha Blackthorn stepped forward. "Regardless of your bloodline, you are not pack. You were exiled. You have no claim here." Kira smiled, and it was sharp as broken glass. "Actually, I do. Pack law is very clear. Any wolf who saves the pack from annihilation has the right to challenge for Alpha. You would not dare. I already killed one Alpha tonight. What is one more?" Blackthorn's eyes widened. "You cannot be serious. Try me." The challenge hung in the air. Official. Binding. Alpha Blackthorn looked at his son, at Darius who could not shift, who could barely stand. Then back at Kira, who stood tall and unafraid. He lowered his eyes. The entire pack gasped. Blackthorn, Alpha of Ironwood for 30 years, had just submitted. To an Omega. To a wolf they had poisoned and broken and thrown away. Except she was not an Omega. She never had been. Kira turned to face the pack. "I claim this territory by right of strength and right of blood. Anyone who challenges my claim, step forward now." No one moved. "I am Alpha," Kira said. "And the first thing I do as Alpha is rewrite the laws that allowed you to abuse those weaker than you. No more Omegas. No more hierarchy built on cruelty. Strength will protect, not dominate." The pack stood silent, processing the revolution that had just occurred. Then, one by one, they bowed. Darius did not bow. He stood frozen, watching this wolf he had destroyed rise from the ashes and claim everything he was supposed to inherit. Kira's eyes found him across the blood-stained ground. "You," she said. "Come here." It was not a request. It was a command, weighted with Alpha authority. Real authority, not the borrowed power he had been losing. Darius's legs moved before he could stop them. He walked to her and stopped 3 feet away, unable to meet her eyes. "Look at me." He looked. Kira studied him for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice carrying to every wolf present. "Darius Blackthorn rejected me when I was powerless. He humiliated me, exiled me, left me to die." She paused. "But he also taught me that mercy is not weakness. So here is my mercy. You are not exiled. You are not banished. You will remain in this pack as a member. Not an heir. Not a leader. Just a wolf. Darius felt his throat close. It was worse than exile. She was making him stay. Making him watch her lead. Making him live with what he had done. Do you accept? Kira asked. Darius looked at her, at this wolf he had never really seen. Yes, he whispered. Then bow. For the first time in his life, Darius Blackthorn lowered his head to someone else. Kira turned away from him like he was nothing. Like he did not matter. And Darius realized with crushing finality that to her, he did not. The pack dispersed slowly, tending wounds, carrying the dead. Kira stood alone in the center of the battlefield, covered in blood that was not hers, and felt the weight of leadership settle on her shoulders. It was heavy, terrifying, but it fit. Darius approached her one last time as the moon rose. He did not get too close. Did not presume. Do you hate me? He asked quietly. Kira looked at him. At this wolf who had broken her. Who had taught her what she was capable of surviving. I do not think about you at all, she said. And she walked away. Darius stood alone in the dark and finally understood what he had lost. Not a mate. Not a bond. A queen. And he had thrown her away like garbage. Kira returned to her cabin that night, washed the blood from her skin, and looked at herself in the broken mirror. The wolf looking back was not the one she had been a month ago. She was Alpha now, leader of a pack that had tortured her, responsible for wolves who had despised her. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something larger, harder, more important than revenge. Tomorrow she would return to Ironwood. She would rebuild it into something better. She would make sure no other wolf suffered what she had suffered. But tonight, she was just Kira, standing in a broken cabin at the edge of the world, finally free. Her wolf settled inside her, calm and strong and no longer afraid. For the first time in her life, Kira smiled and meant it. She had been rejected, exiled, poisoned, and broken. And she had won anyway.